Dr. Kelsey Hayden.
Whoa.
I'm the veterinarian here at the VLM Museum, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what that means and how you become a veterinarian, and I'm going to answer any questions that you guys may have.
We already have one question. What's going on with the snake?
This is just a male pine snake. He's just here hanging out with us. He's actually currently getting over a minor infection, but he's otherwise doing pretty good. So if you're interested in becoming a veterinarian, kind of the first thing you'll want to do is you'll end up taking some college courses. You can either get an actual degree, so I have a bachelor's of science in biology, and then if you want to go to vet school, you can either go in the country, so there's a few schools in the country, there's a few out of country. I went to St. George's University in Grenada, and after that went to Virginia Tech for a clinical year, at which point I did externships at 2 different zoos, both the Virginia Zoo and Sedgwick County Zoo in Kansas. I came into small animal practice in Chesapeake, where I worked in dogs, cats, and exotics, and after that went into a exotic animal internship in Seattle, where I was at the Center for Bird and Exotic Animal Medicine. After that, I ended up here working with these guys. So it's quite a long road. You're probably looking between 8 to 10 years minimum to try and get to this point in a career for exotics, but it's definitely worth it. Yeah, it's not terribly exciting.
Yeah. Do you guys have any questions for our Dr. Kelsey here? She takes really good care of all of our animals. She's kind of a godsend. We have previously never had a full-time vet before, so this is like really fun for us. Our animals are really taking advantage of her every day. So you said this pine snake had an infection, Kelsey?
Yeah, so he had a little bit of a scale issue and he wasn't shedding quite as well as we wanted him to. So he's been on antibiotics. And so for him, he gets injections every 3 days and gets his blood work checked. So he's actually due for every check of his blood work here coming in May. But so far, doing really well. His appetite's good. He's still bright and alert, but otherwise doing pretty great. But just a minor thing, just like people get, just like, you know, dogs and cats get, these guys do get sick every now and then, so we do have to take care of them.
Okay, well, Langston, age 6, says, what does the pine snake eat?
So he eats small mammals here, so right now he's getting rats and mice, and he gets fed weekly, so he gets fed on Fridays. But he does have a good appetite, and he will eat quite a large rat every now and then.
How does he react when you give him injections?
He's actually very good about it. He doesn't seem to respond at all. Some reptiles, just like people, can be a little touchy with shots, but he's actually very good.
So what are the other things you've done with us, Kelsey, well, since you've been here? Let me count the things.
We've done a few surgeries. We actually have done a lot of dental work. So as some of y'all have seen, we did a dental on our beaver nip. So he had his teeth worked on. We've pulled a couple teeth in some other kiddos that have needed it because they're getting older. And just like sometimes older people do in older dogs, you know, certain teeth aren't quite functional anymore and have to be removed. We have done a mass removal on one of our kiddos. We've done an amputation on a rescue. So far, we've done quite a few procedures, and we've been pretty thankful to have kind of a nice veterinary community around us. The Cove has allowed us to bring animals to them for evaluations. We took a small owl over there for a cardiac exam. We've had the ophthalmologist, Dr. Heather Brookshire, on site to look at our birds and mammals' eyes. We've taken animals over to Blue Pearl and Virginia Beach for more specialty imaging. So far, we've had a lot of really good connections and able to use those to really help our animals. So right now, we've done quite a lot.
How often do the animals get checkups from Natalie?
So right now, most of these guys are getting them every 6 months to 12 months. Some of these guys are a little bit more frequent, sometimes every 3 months or more, just because they are having some old age issues, just like animals always get. And so we monitor their weights pretty frequently. We monitor their diets and their appetites. We monitor how much they're going to the bathroom, if they're having any issues keeping their food down with vomiting. These guys get blood work done every 6 to 12 months just to make sure that their organs are functioning normally and they don't have any underlying infections. Exotic animals are really good about hiding when they're sick. So whereas like when you and I feel sick, we pretty much tell somebody that we don't feel well. These guys will hide it for months to even years at a time. So it's pretty important to look at these guys regularly.
I'm assuming in regards to the snake, do you guys feed frozen? I know it's safer generally.
Yeah, so we currently do frozen thawed animals for ours. We don't do live feeding just because live prey can be dangerous. You know, a live rat left in a snake's cage can definitely cause a lot of damage and actually chew through the skin and muscles of their backs.
Eleanor, age 4, wants to know how big will he grow to be?
He's full grown and he's about as long as I am.
Yeah, he's pretty long.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
Kara wants to know, is he venomous?
He is not venomous. So pine snakes, even though they kind of look like rattlers and color formation, are actually a non-venomous snake.
Jan wants you to talk about his coloring. So how do you identify him, I guess, based on his color?
So for him, I'm looking at kind of the bands on his skin. So you can see in his scales, he's got these cream and black bands. And the other thing I look at with these guys, if I come up near his eyes, which can be hard to see, is he's got round pupils. And a lot of our non-venomous species are going to have round pupils, whereas our more venomous guys, a lot of our rattlers and copperheads will have slit-like pupils like cats.
Also, guys, if this were venomous, we'd have several people not be handling him this easily.
Absolutely.
That's very dangerous.
So we don't handle any of our venomous snakes free-handed like this. We also always handle them with trained personnel that are in the room at all times. They're handled on snake hooks and tongs to ensure that nobody gets accidentally bitten. Most snakes are not aggressive. These guys are defensive. They're definitely more afraid of us than we are of them. And so anytime a snake typically bites or strikes, it's out of fear.
So someone's requesting that maybe you show us approximately where on his body his major organs are, like his heart, lungs, and stomach. Let's do a show.
He may not cooperate quite as well for that.
Warning.
He's awake and he's warm. So everything's kind of elongated. So their heart sits what we call the proximal third of their body. So if we come down, heart will be through here. And so far as with his respiratory tract, their GI tract is also elongated, so it stretches kind of the whole length of his body. Liver lies through here as well. Both of his kidneys are going to be further down. Their male kind of sexual organs are even further down here toward their vent. He's not going to want me to shake that off for you. He's already hissing a little bit.
He's a private snake.
He's a little done with that. So everything in a snake is kind of elongated.
What's the biggest snake found in Virginia?
Oh gosh, I'd have to double check length, but it very well could be some of these guys. I know pine snakes get incredibly long. Some of our black rat snakes get very long.
I know black racers get really long
Racers
as
do
well.
get long, but
Yeah.
as far as what the actual largest one is, I'd have to check for you. I'm sure there's always some exceptions to the rule.
And can you go over again what he eats? I think we had Chris come in late.
Yeah, so this guy eats frozen rodents right now for us, so frozen rats and mice that we thaw for him. Like we told earlier, we don't do live prey for our reptiles here just because of the risk of damage to our animals, because live prey does fight back, and if these guys do not feel hungry that day, the rat itself will also get hungry. And so these guys oftentimes will get chewed on by live rodents if not monitored. So.
What's your favorite animal to work on?
I actually love snakes.
Yeah.
I love snakes and I love wolves, so I'm in a pretty lucky position here that I get to work with amazing reptiles and wonderful canids, and so I'm pretty much in heaven for being a vet.
Kelsey, do you have any pets at home?
Oh gosh. I have a small zoo, so I have 2 dogs and I have 2 pythons at home, and I have a chameleon. So 2 of my reptiles are rescues, and one of them I purchased. I know, bad person. So I've got a veiled chameleon, which is a beautiful species, but he has metabolic bone disease. He came to me as a surrender. And then I have a rescued ball python who is kind of growth stunted due to not being cared for properly when he was really young. And I have an Angolan python that I use for educational purposes.
We have a question. Have you ever found a snake in your museum where he shouldn't be, either an exhibit or wild one? And I can answer that. Yes. We have actually found several snakes that have come in from the outside, chasing mice and rats in to feed. And actually, our exhibit water snake came to us that way. He just kind of happened to be inside, and we found him and we put him on exhibit. And I think also one of our rough greens, I think, just kind of wandered in through the front door, believe it or not.
I mean, we see garter snakes all the time on the trail.
Yes.
He is getting real curious now. Now he's awake.
Now we're awake.
Yeah.
You guys have any other questions for Kelsey? Please keep popping them in. Otherwise, we're just going to watch this pine snake crawl all over her body. So we have a second pine snake, don't we, Kelsey?
We do. So we have a male and a female. They do not breed, so kind of sad for us because we would love to get some baby pines.
We were hoping they would.
Yeah, but they don't want to live together. They don't like each other, so they live separately. They share the exhibit space, so every now and then one will come off, the other one will go on, depending on how they're feeling. He's currently off exhibit. He's normally our pine snake that you guys will see out in the museum, but since he's been dealing with his infection, we've pulled him. But he's actually doing so much better. He's at the kind of the tail end of his treatment, so he's looking great. Our female pine is currently out on exhibit, and she's right now going through a shed. Otherwise, she might be out here with us instead, but she's looking a little gray right now. And then as far as other big reptiles, you guys have seen our alligators on the lives. You've seen our snapping turtle. We have a plethora of snakes, both venomous and non-venomous, on exhibit. We also have a couple educational animals that aren't on exhibit here that aren't publicized just because they're not native, that came to us either through kind of rescue or owners that couldn't keep them anymore, that we provide forever homes for. But for the most part, these guys are kind of what we showcase as all of our natural species.
So Maddie, age 6, wants to know why his scales look like seeds.
It's just who he is. This is just what his species looks like. So they've got these beautiful kind of raised little scales, and he feels almost like rice grains do if you were to line them on a piece of paper. So he actually feels really cool. And you can actually see his skin in between his scales if you look really close. And their skin is not slimy like a lot of people want to think. They actually feel very dry and almost silky.
What are your opinions on rough green snakes? They are one of our watchers' favorites, apparently.
I love them.
So do I.
Wonderful, and they're absolutely beautiful. We have, I think, 2 here right now. And they're just both just wonderful to work with. They're typically very healthy animals, never really give us any issues. They're just stunningly beautiful. I've never gotten to see one in the wild though, so I'm not that lucky.
I saw 3. Well, what is the most common snake in Hampton Roads? From John.
As far as the absolute most common, I'd probably say your black rats and your racers.
Yeah.
I see those guys everywhere. I almost never see garters out and about. I'm sure plenty of people do, but where I'm from, they're just not as common.
We actually have a lot of garters on property here.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know a lot of people that deal with black racers and rat snakes, and they're absolutely fantastic animals. They're wonderful for keeping the rodent populations down. And so, you know, I'm a huge proponent of keeping them on your property if you can.
So we have a comment from Teresa. My son Tyler thinks you can tell if a snake is poisonous by looking at the eyes. Is that true?
So yeah, so most venomous snakes will have slit-like pupils. I'm sure there might be exceptions to the rule. I'd have to double check all the species because there are quite a large number of snake species in the world. But in general, when I look at a snake's eyes, slit-like pupils typically tell us not to be cautious. The round pupils like this guy has, let's see if I let you see his face. Come here, handsome. So he has round pupils.
There we Yep, got it.
And he is a non-venomous snake.
So Langston, age 6, says, what kind of snake is good to have as a pet?
So that is kind of a difficult question. It depends on a lot of things. One, it depends on how experienced you are with reptiles, and it depends on what kind of snakes you like. A lot of people do keep small, kind of restricting snakes, so we think like the pythons and the boas. As far as, snakes for beginners, as far as like a captive red corn snake, that's probably a nice starter snake for someone that's never had a reptile before, let alone a snake. They're pretty kind of, I don't want to call them basic, but their needs are not quite as niche. Once you get into bigger pythons and bigger boas, you do borderline on a risk factor. A lot of people aren't aware of how large some of those snakes can get, and they very quickly can outgrow their enclosures. And so a lot of that comes down to how much space you have available for a snake, how much time you can devote. And then there's also quite a large financial burden with some of these animals. The lighting and the heating supplements that you need for them, the amount of prey you're going to feed a large snake. And so it can be quite a tricky question.
So Brett wants to know, when did you first know you wanted to be a zoo vet?
Oh God. Probably when I was 3. I knew I wanted to be a vet, and I loved wild animals, and I was hooked on Jack Hanna's videos and the Discovery Channel and Steve Irwin, and I just knew that I wanted to work with these animals for the rest of my life, and I wanted to work with them in a medical aspect because I really felt that their health and their well-being was absolutely paramount to keeping them in captivity, and so that was a huge driving force.
So I know that most of your animals don't have names, but do you guys, as their keepers, give them pet names? We actually have names for about everything.
A lot of them have pet names. I don't believe this big guy has a pet name. Everybody loves him though. He's quite a favorite with the keepers. But as far as pet names, yeah, some of us, we call them kind of cutesy things when we walk by or talk to them. But for the most part, the names they have that are known to the public are the names we use here.
So what's the weirdest thing you've worked on?
Oh goodness. So the weirdest thing I've worked on here, all these guys are pretty native. We've done a lot with the possums and the skunks, pelicans, owls. The weirdest thing I've worked on ever was probably a tyra, which is, I always tell people it kind of looks like the mix between a bear and a ferret. It's not what it is, but it's like kind of like a pretty elongated, kind of small carnivore. I've worked with some chimpanzees, even though, to be quite honest, they scare me. Done some with wolves, as well as some anteaters. I've worked with tamanduas.
What?
Yeah. Things people don't know about me.
Secret life of Kelsey Hayden.
Yeah. Hidden stories.
You have a very soothing voice, apparently. Does it help when you talk to the animals? That's a comment, by the way.
I hope so.
Seems like it.
You know, I've worked with animals a long time. I hope they didn't hate my voice.
I don't think so. I guess we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. You guys, thanks so much for joining us today and meeting with our awesome vet, Dr. Kelsey Hayden. Be sure to come back again next time. Our next show is going to be tomorrow morning at 11 on Facebook Live. And join us for all of our natural education on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and some other stuff. And then join our website for more updated information on our openings, on ways you can contribute to the museum, donating to our emergency fund, and everything. If you guys have any other questions for Dr. Kelsey or ever, go ahead and leave them in our comments, and we'll get to them later on. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys next time.
See you.